Hi there, this is Dr. Everybody. Going to take a look at Project 3. This one takes a little more work than our previous ones. A little bit of a step up. We get some control, a little bit of looping, a little bit of conditionals, if, else, and so on. And let's take a look at the code itself. So what are we looking at here? So we have we're going to repeatedly prompt and enter these four items: code, the number of days, starting reading of the odometer, and the odometer's end reading. And we're going to halt when the user puts a Q in, or a little q, instead of the classification code. Now, what are the codes? So the codes are a B, a D, and if we look down a little bit further, there's also a W for the budget, daily, and weekly rentals. Now, anytime we write a piece of code, we're going to want to write it in piecewise fashion. Just get a little bit going, and then get a little bit more, and a little bit more. So what are the pieces of this one that we want to look at? Well, the biggest thing is that we are going to keep asking for codes until we get this Q. We don't know how many times that's going to be, so that is going to need a while loop. And then we're going to be only dealing with B's, D's, and W's. Okay? So then we're going to need to make sure that we're only getting those. So if I don't get one of those, then we have a problem and we have to ask for some other input. So I'm going to look at these two parts first. Just going to completely ignore everything else. I'm not going to deal with the days. I'm not going to deal with the odometer readings. I'm just going to deal with, first of all, this major while loop, and then dealing with these codes coming in. No calculations. Let's keep it simple and start with that. All right, so what do I mean about a while loop that will give us some control? So let's open up a piece of code here, and we better save it. So here's my proj03. I'll call it a.py. Now, what are we going to do? We are going to have a while loop. So our while loop, and what are we going to do? We are going to keep going until the user enters a Q. So we're going to need a Boolean here. That's our Q check. Now, what am I going to be doing? I'm going to be checking for some input. So we need some input. And what's the first thing that comes in? It's a code string. So we will take a code string, enter code. We're going to have to, we'll later on we'll fancy it up and get some better wording, but this is a start. So we're going to enter a code, and what are we going to do? We are going to stop if they enter a Q. So we're going to keep going as long as they don't enter a Q. So just to do something, again, we're just printing it out. Let's print code. And then in my, this is where I'll do something. This is where all the good stuff will be done. And after I've done all my processing, well, I'm going to have to ask for the code string again. And this is a very common pattern for while loops. And so what do? We start off with an initial value of our code string, then we check it. We got a little Boolean expression here that it's not equal to Q. If it's not equal to Q, then we're going to do something here. I just printed the code. And then after we've done stuff, and there might be many, many lines of code in here, then we get another one at the bottom of the loop, and we go back up and check it again. And then just to do something, let's after this loop, let's do something like just say print that we're done. All right. So let me add that in there. So after the loop, print done. And we can now test this out. Now notice how many things I've ignored. I've ignored, you know, all the days and the odometer readings and even lowercase q, and did I enter a valid letter. I've ignored all that. We're going to just start with something. All right, so let me slide this over out of the way, and let's run this. And it says enter a code, and let's enter a bogus code, A. All right, we put in an A. There are a couple extra characters. Sometimes idle does that. Don't worry about that. And so I can keep going and entering all sorts of letters. It prints it out and asks me for another one. And eventually, let's see, when I do a Q, then we're done. So I've got this basic control. I can enter a code, and I can keep entering codes until I get one that does that, until I get a Q, and then then we're done. Now, all right, a good thing to work on next is you know, that here I'm only stopping with capital letter Q, and the instructions say I have to stop with a lowercase q. Right? There are multiple ways to handle that, and I'm just not going to deal. I'm going to leave that for you right now. Because Q has quotes on it, it's a string. Feel free to read ahead in the strings, and you might get some cute, clues there. But I'm going to ignore that right now and let you figure that one out. But you know, one of the things about this is that, you know, if your program only stops on a capital Q and everything else works, you'll still get most of the credit. Right? And so, you know, you can build this thing in pieces. So what else do we have? Well, there are three different valid codes. We have the we have a code. We have a basic code for B. We have a daily code, and we have a weekly code. Just those three. So those are the only valid codes that can be entered. So as a second step, let's now make sure that we are getting those codes and we're doing something if we get those codes. Otherwise, we're going to ask for a new code. And how might I do that? Well, if I get a good code, then and that'll be a Boolean. Okay, so I've got a good code Boolean. I get a good code Boolean, then I will deal with the codes. I'll do stuff. Otherwise, I want to say, oh, hey, bad code. And not do all the stuff, but then go and ask for a new code string. So if I get good code, that is, somebody gives me a B, a D, a W, then I'll do stuff. Otherwise, I'll say print bad code. And for doing stuff, for right now, I'm just going to print good code. Just so I'm doing something. And the reality is, in here, you'll have many lines of code. Let's see what that looks like. So I've printed the code string in here, and now what we'll do is we will say if we have a good code, and that's going to be a Boolean expression, and I'm not going to do that right now. Then we are going to do something, and that doing something we're going to want to be indented. And so if I have good code, I'm going to say, just so that I'm doing something, good code. Otherwise, if I don't have good code, it must be bad code. Bad code, try again. I'll notice what we have here is that, so I'm going to have to come up with a Boolean, all right? But if I have good code, then I'm going to process stuff, and here I just say good code. Otherwise, I'm going to say bad code, try again, and notice I still have this prompt at the bottom, and that will say enter a code. So let's check this out. Let's see how this works. Now, again, we still don't have the Boolean in there. So what I have is I have a piece of code which I have hidden from you here, which does exactly that. We enter a code, and if I enter code A, it says bad code. Well, that's to be expected, right? If I say B, that's good code, all right? And then then I say enter code. I don't know, X. That one's isn't any good. Let's put W. There's one of my good ones. Let's see what else is good. D is good. That also works. Let's try something else. M, bad code. All right. And I'll keep going around until I get a Q, and I'm done. Right. So now I have code that can, that knows that I've entered the correct values or not. Now, let's take a moment with this good code Boolean. How do I check that out? Well, what I can do is, if I move over here back to my shell, is let's just take, let's just set a code string to be one of our good ones. So let's have code string be assigned to be B. All right? Now we can play around with Booleans. So what would good code be? Well, one thing you might try is it's equal to B, and code string is equal to daily, and code string is equal to weekly. And what's the value of that expression? It's false. Well, code was B, and the expression that I wrote down there gave me a false, so that's clearly not the right expression. And what you want to do is play around with it here in the shell until you get that expression right. In fact, you can almost not think about it, but just keep randomly trying stuff until you get something that works. But you have to remember that some bogus code value like A, that, so you want to check it with a good code like B. You want to check it with a bad code like A, and the good code, your expression should give you a true, and a bad one should give you a false. So this expression here, this is going to be my good code Boolean. Once I get that figured out, once I get that expression figured out, I will take it and plug it into my code here. So you play around with it till you get it right, check it in the shell, and then put it into your program and get your program working. And notice that once I have that working, such as I tested over here, once I get that working, now I have code that can handle my program can handle the various input codes. All right. What do I do next? Well, I then need to start doing something. And what might I do? Well, here. This is where all the good stuff is going to go. I'm going to do something. And what am I going to do? Well, if my code is B, then I'm going to want to process my code, and for right now I'm just going to say print processing B. And later on I will actually put some arithmetic and stuff like that. Otherwise, if my code is D, and notice that's going to be a Boolean expression, right? I'm going to have to, you know, come up with a Boolean expression just like that one is. Then I'm going to print processing D. Otherwise, if the code is W, I'm going to print processing W. All right. All this stuff is going to go in there because this is my good code part. And when that's done, we end up with, again, another piece of hidden code here because you still have to do the work. But what happens? So I enter a code. If I give it a bogus 1A, it says bad one, do it again. If I give it a B, it now says, processing code B. If I give it a C, no, that's bad one. If I give it a D, it says, here's where I'm processing code D. And the same thing with W. Here's where I'm processing code W. If I give it bogus stuff, it says try again. And then of course I always check to make sure that it finishes right. So my program now, as I have it up, where it says something like processing code D, I'm going to have many lines of code now that will in fact process that. So my doing something part now, it will actually say, if you give me a B, I'm actually going to do something. Right now I'm just printing. If you give me a D, I'm going to do something. Right now I'm just printing. Give me a W, I'm going to do something. So now the next stage is, let's just take one of these. Let's take the B. So if I get the B, let's actually calculate what the charge is. And to do that, if we look at our program, if we look at the specifications, it says that I need the number of days, the odometer start, the odometer end, because I'm going to charge for each day. That's that value. And then how many miles driven? Well, that'll be my end value minus my start value. Now there are various issues here. Like there might be, suppose the odometer has rolled over, and I have to make sure that I've got 6 digits of input, and all various things like that. We're not going to deal with that right now. I'm just going to do a simple calculation and try it, just to take me to the next step. And so what that looks like is when I did that piece of code again. All right, so I enter a code. If I give it an A, it says bad code. I give it a B now, it says, enter days. Well, let's do this for 2 days. What's the odometer start? Let's say it starts at 0. Notice I'm not giving 6 digits. I'll deal with that later on. All right. Enter odometer end. And again, I want to phrase these nicer later on once I get working. So something simple, 2 days, odometer, we've gotten 10 miles, right? And it calculates a charge. So I've got 2 days, it started at 0, it ended at 10, that meant it went 10 miles. So each day is 40, and then each mile is 25 cents. So 82.50, and is right. And now there's a number of things. I don't have the dollar sign there. It doesn't print out with a 0. That'd be nice, but we don't know how to do that yet. But now I've got it calculated. Now there's a whole lot of things that it doesn't do. So for example, if I enter the code for D, it says a D, and this says, okay, enter the number of days. We'll do 0. I accidentally put a character in there, and it blew up, and we said, well, we don't care. We're not checking for that. Right? So now I have code that can just handle B. Right? So I kept it simple. It was only a few lines of code. Once I have that working, I can now work on the D part. Okay? And you'll notice in the D part that there's an if in there. So I'm clearly going to have an if statement as part of that. And the same thing with the when we look at the W code. Oh, there's an if. Oh, and there's another if in there, right? So that gets, the logic in there gets messier, but we can build this a little bit at a time. And that's the important part. So let me review what I did. We first of all did a basic while loop. And then I did a while, and I checked for the right code. And then I did something for each code. I just printed. And then finally, I did B. So there were 1, 2, 3, 4 different development stages, always having a working piece of code. The biggest mistake that you can make is to say, okay, I'm going to sit down and write the whole thing and start testing it. Dumb idea. Really dumb idea. Each of these stages, I added 4 or 5 lines of code. If I made a mistake, guess what? I had 4 or 5 lines of code to look at for my error. If I wrote down 50 lines of code and then started checking, I got 50 lines of code to find the error in. That's going to take me 10 times longer. So do it in small stages. I've given you some of the stages here. There's still a lot of stuff left to be done, but you will, if you go through these stages and then do the D and the W, each one of those is going to be relatively small. All right, good luck with it.